Tensions between South Korea and Japan are continuing to grow amid Tokyo unwilling to lift export curbs on several important tech components to Seoul. The South Korean government, firms and people are taking a strong stand against Japan for tightening its exports to retaliate Korea's Supreme Court ruling on victims of Japanese forced labor. On July 7th, Seoul's presidential chief of staff for policy, Kim Sang-jo, has met with domestic business leaders to seek countermeasures.
5대 그룹을 비롯한 우리나라의 주요 기업들에 직접 연락을 해서 국익을 위해서는 정부와 재계가 함께 소통하고 협력해야 된다는 뜻을 전달을 하고 지금 협의를 하고 있습니다.
South Korean consumers have started to boycott Japanese goods, and the movement is growing nationwide. People made and spread the list of Japanese firms to boycott on social media, and also started to hold individual protests against Japanese products. Meanwhile, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe mentioned how North Korean sanctions could have affected its decision to place the export curbs to South Korea at a recent debate. The Seoul-Tokyo conflicts, ignited by issues related to history, economy, politics and security, is continuing to threaten the safety of Northeast Asia.
Hello, welcome to The Point World Affairs. I'm your host, Daniel Che. Seoul-Tokyo relations deteriorated even further with Japan imposing export curbs on South Korea. Resolving this matter quickly seems difficult. Once again, today we'll delve deeper into this topic. Let's get to the point. And to help us dissect the topic for today into digestible bites, we're joined again by Song Se-ryun, Professor of Law from Kyung-hee University. Thank you so much for being here with us again.
Hello, Daniel. Good to see you again.
Well, it's going to be an extension of last week's discussions. It's about the tension escalating between Seoul and Tokyo. How serious is the situation right now because of the export curb that Japan has imposed on this nation?
Well, it's pretty bad. I think you can look at it several ways. One, economically, it'll obviously hurt Korean companies that are subject to the attack. But in the long run, trade wars, if it escalates, nobody wins. That's the lesson of the history. So in that sense, that situation probably is not a good move.
And Japan, especially its prime minister, claims that this is not in any way, shape, or form a retaliatory measure because of the historic disputes the two sides have been having. But judging by the words that are coming out during his sessions and interviews and the timing and all the facts and the matters that's related to whole development so far, it's looking harder for him to deny this fact.
Well, from the get-go, I don't think they fooled nobody on that narrative. Everybody thought, including the Japanese media, that this move was triggered by their dissatisfaction with what was happening in the judicial system in Korea, and they wanted to kind of steer the narratives towards that direction, but that didn't work. So this kind of move came about.
Well, Japan claims Korea triggered the trade measures, but Tokyo's logic on this whole matter seems quite unconvincing. There are some remarks made by its Prime Minister and Foreign Minister regarding this particular topic. Let's have a listen.
優遇的にしていたものをこの意見交換ができないというようなこと、あるいは不適切事案があったということから、
詳細に申し上げれば、約束を守らないという中においては、今までの優遇措置は取れない。これ間違って報道しているところがあるんですが。
So Japan is again playing the victim card. They've trusted Korea, and now it's time for them to pull a few preferential treatments back from where they came from.
Right. Victim card, it does look very unnatural about it. I think that as everybody is saying, this is triggered by their motivation to use this in an upcoming election. I think it's a move to stir up some nationalistic sentiment among Japanese.
Right, and domestic firms, of course, are hit hard by these measures, and the president wanted to talk to some of the top movers and shakers in the industry at the nation's top office of Cheongwade. What would you speculate would have been formulated during that session? Is it just to coordinate their views and opinions and possible measures moving forward, or are they preparing something else?
Right. I think the business leaders would have some demands on it. Probably the demand is that you gotta solve this problem diplomatically because it hurts the business, it hurts the economy. In Korea's situation, for better or worse, the high-tech industry is a large chunk of our GDP, about 17%, and especially the semiconductor and displays. If you want to name the companies, Samsung and SK Hynix, those companies occupy a large chunk of what we do economically. So in that sense, it's going to hurt, and it's going to hurt in the short term. People talk about the opportunities in the long term by changing the kind of a proportions of what we do in industry-wise, but that's a long-term talk. In the short term, probably it's going to be a painful experience for those companies.
Staying with the South Korean leader, President Moon Jae-in said he is mulling measures against Japan's export curbs. Here's what he said on July 8th.
전례 없는 비상황 상황에 무엇보다 중요한 것은 정부와 경제계가 긴밀하게 소통하고 협력하는 것입니다. 상황의 진전에 따라서는 민관이 함께하는 비상대응 체제 구축도 검토해야 합니다. 대응과 맞대응의 악순환은 양국 모두에게 결코 바람직하지 않습니다. 그러나 한국의 기업들에게 피해가 실제적으로 발생할 경우 우리 정부로서도 필요한 대응을 하지 않을 수 없을 것입니다. 저는 그렇게 되기를 바라지 않습니다. 일본 측의 조치 철회와 양국 간의 성의 있는 협의를 촉구합니다.
Well, this is a very difficult situation for President Moon Jae-in. He has been making a strong and stern statement against Japan, and now they have to deal with another matter with Japan throwing this particular issue into I guess the arena of discussions.
Right. In that sense, President Moon Jae-in could legitimately say that this is not a fair fight. But it's what it is, and we have seen this before in other parts of the world as well. So the question is how we will resolve this issue. If it's a diplomatic issue, obviously the government has to take the lead to open up the dialogues with Japan. But at the same time, I think that a lot has to do with what was happening even a long time before this has happened, the relationship between two countries, how they view history in different lights and different sentiments. So in that sense, it's not an easy issue, but as many of the neighbors and families they learn to coexist and work together, I think we have to come up with some solutions as to how we can be neighbors again.
Well, they have important key tech items like fluorine polyamide, resistant etching gas. These are crucial in especially the semiconductors industry. Some are saying the stockpile we have in Korea might run out quite quickly, faster than anticipated. Why was there never a move to try and be more self-reliant in terms of these particular items? Is there a special significance that these items can only be produced or manufactured or prepared by the Japanese?
I think there are several issues. One, if it's that important, as you said, obviously it's prudent to have a diverse sourcing sources, or maybe have a capacity to produce it ourselves. But having said that, the world, the global supply chain and the world system is based on the trust and the division of labor, that if you're good at producing something, then we'll trust you that you will take on that part and we'll take on another. It's probably questionable in a sense that from the parts and components export, Japan has been reaping a lot of benefit in this transaction. Korea has been running a trade deficit for 50 some odd years because of that situation. So you can blame the lack of preparation, but the global economy is based on that kind of system. So that's why if the businessmen were to make kind of decisions, probably they would not have made this kind of difficult decisions.
And we know this measure wasn't something that came out of a stroke of genius or an impulsive response, something that's been planned and it took some time for Japan.
That's what people are saying. There are people who are saying that, well, this is a kind of a stopgap measure, very ad hoc measure because the upper house election is coming up later this month. But I don't think that explains the situation to the extent that we can understand it, because this kind of dispute between the two countries over the historical measures have a deep history. We can even go back to hundreds of years before because of our proximity and kind of struggles that we had. So in that sense, the Japanese move at this point, it has been contemplated. Probably they weighed pros and cons, and also they selected these items that could really hurt a Korean economy. So I don't think this is something that will go away right after the election.
Well, staying with Japan's leader and some of his ways of hurting Korea, it looks like Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's new approach in taking a jab at South Korea is suggesting Seoul might be violating North Korean sanctions. Let's take a listen to what he said.
安全保障上の、ための貿易管理をそれぞれの国が果たしていかなければならないという、実はこれ義務なんです。その義務の中において、相手の国が詳細に申し上げれば約束を守らないという中においては、今までの優遇措置は取れない。これ間違って報道しているところがあるんですが、禁輸するんではないんです。今までの優遇措置は取れませんねということでありました。
He is rallying his support base, it seems, Shinzo Abe, raising a nationalistic approach to touch some of the sentiments that's not prevalent, but existing in Japan, it seems.
Right. He's trying to bring in this argument of national security because a lot of government actions can be excused if it is related to national security. But just like his excuse that this is not a retaliatory actions, not a lot of people are buying it because he didn't give any kind of evidences to support that allegation. Korean government officials said that they looked into it, they couldn't find any evidences of that. And even if there was some instances like that, I think the normal course of action would have been that the Japanese government would open up a dialogue about this issue, and both government will probably go into investigative move. Without that kind of a preparation, they would just spring up this kind of retaliatory measures. That kind of says a lot about their motivation.
There are some people who say, well, high-ranking Japanese officials who say that some of the materials could be used to make biological weapons in terms of some of the exports that may have been sent to North Korea. And I understand some of these items, let's say etching gas, it's toxic, and it cannot be stored for a long period of time. So what does the lifespan or the shelf life of this particular element or material say about the possibility or the probability of South Korea aiding North Korean weapons developments?
Right. It doesn't go beyond a month or two, so that's why it's hard to stockpile those materials, and it has to go through kind of a continuous supply chain actions to get supplied. So I think that if they selected these items because of that kind of characteristics, it's probably they have gone through a lot of analysis as to which elements would hurt the most.
So it's unprecedented, so it seems like we'll have to find a very unique and creative solution to this. I suppose it's not going to be resolved in a hurry. It might take some time.
That's the worry. If, as some people say, it's totally for the elections that is coming up this month, probably they might be mistaken. Japanese government has been preparing for this. Probably they feel the need to sustain this if the Shinzo Abe's ultimate goal is to change the constitution of Japan, to change it from peace constitution to more, as he says, regular constitutions. Probably he needs to maintain this kind of unitary sentiment against some common enemies. Unfortunately, what he picked is South Korea at this point.
Okay. Well, Korea is the only East Asian nation among 27 countries on the Japanese trade whitelist. Losing that privilege will deal Seoul a significant blow. To take a deep dive on this matter, we connect live via Skype with an expert, Stephen R. Nagy, Senior Associate Professor at International Christian University in Tokyo. Hello there.
Hi, thank you very much for having me today. It's really wonderful to talk about this important issue between Japan and South Korea.
Thank you so much for being here with us today. Well, Japan is planning to scratch South Korea off from its export whitelist. What does this indicate, and how do you assess this particular move?
Well, I think that it demonstrates that, the major pillars of stability between South Korea and Japan really have been fractured. Traditionally, the political, military, and business levels have been used to ensure that South Korea and Japan relations aren't distracted by nationalism at both sides. And unfortunately, I think that this play is being used to try to shift the domestic politics within the South Korean context, so that South Korea will perhaps change some of its decisions with regards to the charges of forced labor on Japanese businesses, but also this kind of long-term erosion in South Korea and Japanese relations.
Removing Korea from the whitelist, it seems to be an escalation of move from the export restrictions. How do you think it will affect Korea and also the global economy because of this move?
So South Korea is, I think, at this stage, the 12th or 13th largest economy in the world today. And it plays a very, very important part in terms of the production of liquid electronic displays, as well as chips. And signature companies like Samsung are the leaders in these areas. Now, what Japan has done is that it's going to make the requirement for the export of particular products from Japan. They're called resist products, which are used in the chip making process, as well as other specialty projects. It'll require up to 3 months. So what this will do, it will slow the production many of South Korea's key products that are used for global exports. So what are the consequences here? I think for South Korean businesses, this will require them to draw upon their existing resources, how much they've saved up for a rainy day, but it will also push them to look for other supply chains to push them away from Japan. I think that this is probably not a productive process for both relations. It's important that South Koreans and Japanese continue to engage at the business level, cooperate at the business level. This is the direction that they should be going to ensure prosperity and stability of both states. And at this stage, I don't think both countries are moving in this direction. Now, how will this affect global supply chains? Well, what we're going to see is South Korea reach out to American counterparts, Chinese counterparts, to provide for these products that are used in many of the important products that South Korean products are making. And that could increase the cost of products. It could also decrease the quality of the well-known South Korean products that are such as the Galaxy phone that Samsung has really been at the forefront of selling globally.
Well, thank you so much for your time and expertise. We appreciate it. Coming back to you, Professor Song, it looks like Japan hinted at additional retaliatory measures. It could expand into raising tariffs, regulating remittance and boosting the visa screening process even. So this could even spill over to the cultural exchange realm as well.
Right. I think it's totally unnecessary to do that, but if the Japanese government is contemplating it,
this initial move was unnecessary to begin with.
Right.
So.
It's spelling the kind of a total or out, the war. I don't want to use that word, but it seems like they're bringing in all kinds of different methods, or they hinted at the possibility of bringing all their might to steer the narratives to their way. Probably Korea would not go or agree with that kind of directions. If Japan has domestic issues, President Moon Jae-in is situated in a similar fashion as well. If he wants to kind of stick to the political schedule, there's a general election coming up next year. So in that sense, both parties have plenty of incentives to kind of be entrenched in this nationalistic fervor. I hope that they don't go that way. I hope that they will open up dialogues to kind of get back to the rule that if it's a diplomatic issue, let's resolve it diplomatically. If it's an economic issue, then do it accordingly. But the missing up that way will just make the matters unnecessarily difficult.
Well, we're hoping there will be some voices of reason that convince Abe to make the right choice. But for now, it seems like even when South Korea quickly took this matter to the WTO and talked about the situation, Japan seemed unfazed, and they remain adamant that there's nothing wrong or there's nothing that they did that in any way violates WTO guidelines. But the irony of it all is that he made this move right after his statements at the G20 meeting about how we should all work together, and free trade is important to the world.
Right. That's why a lot of people are saying that's a hypocritical move, because one day after he was saying, essentially, not in so many words, that Japan adheres to this kind of rules, and the expectation was that the Japan would play some or render some leadership in that area, because Japan is obviously a big economic actor in the world, number 3 in the world in that sense. So there is a natural expectation that there will be a guardian of this, the principles, so that the other countries can take advantage of that. So the betrayal of what they said the 24 hours ago probably will have disappointed a lot of people. And that's why it throws in a question mark as to whether the Japan can be a leader, or moral, or even the business leader in this region and the global stage.
Right. We do hope Japan realizes what they're losing while they're trying to attain whatever short-term goals they have, losing the trust that's been built over decades. It's not something that they want to have on their hands. We do hope they have a chance to listen to voices of reasons internally, and of course for the South Korean government and companies and industries, we cheer them on as they try to use this as an opportunity or wake-up call to find different ways to be better prepared for all comers in the future. Thank you so much for being here with us, Professor Song Se-ryun, and sharing us with your insights and making our program complete.
My pleasure. Thank you.
South Korea-Japan relations take a dangerous turn, and the world is paying close attention to the latest developments. Here's the latest on this particular issue. Let's roll the clip.
South Korea has called for a joint investigation by an international organization into whether Japan or South Korea itself has violated the international sanctions on North Korea. The proposal was made by First Deputy Chief at the National Security Office Kim Yoo-gun during a briefing at the Blue House on Friday.
The Japanese government needs to provide clear evidence of the South Korean government's alleged misconduct and breaking of laws. To end this unnecessary dispute and clarify the truth of Japan's claims or lack thereof, our government proposes that the two countries request a fair investigation of each country's export control violations by an expert panel at the UN Security Council or another relevant international organization.
This comes after a series of allegations by Japanese officials that South Korea cannot be trusted to faithfully implement North Korea's sanctions. Japanese media have also reported that Seoul has been allowing strategic materials into the north, materials that can be used to develop its weapons program. Kim expressed deep regret over those claims and their lack of proof, and made clear that Seoul has been fully enforcing the UN sanctions and other major export control regimes. He said that Tokyo should ask itself whether it has done the same. To back his claims, he pointed out that over the past 4 years, South Korea caught and revealed more than 150 attempts to illegally ship out such materials. If the joint investigation reveals that South Korea was wrongly accused, Kim demanded that Japan apologize and stop its export restrictions immediately.
That's all we have for you today. Do tune in again same time next week for a brand new episode of The Point World Affairs. Thank you so much for watching.